The stars stretched across the void like 1,000 tiny lanterns, cold and distant. In the cockpit of a battered freighter, a single father named Eli scanned the instruments with tired eyes. Years of hauling cargo through uncharted space had left him lean, with lines etched deep around his eyes, but his determination never faltered. He had a young son, Jaren, waiting for him back on the small colony world of Vera, and that responsibility kept him sharp, kept him moving even when the galaxy itself seemed indifferent. On this trip, Eli had been contracted to deliver emergency medical supplies to a remote outpost on the ice planet of Lyranine. The planet's surface was a harsh, frozen desert of jagged ice cliffs and howling winds, the kind of place most pilots avoided unless desperate. Eli, however, didn't shy from danger. He had to earn enough to keep a roof over Jaren's head and food on the table. As the freighter descended through Lyranine's thin, frigid atmosphere, the scanners picked up two small life forms encased in glistening frost, drifting in a field of broken ice. Eli froze, his hand hovering over the emergency landing controls. There was no mistaking them. They were alive, Jaren, he muttered under his breath. I think we've found trouble. The ship shuddered as Eli brought it down onto the ice, kicking up a blizzard of frozen shards. When the ramp lowered, the cold hit like a physical wall, biting through even the ship's thermal suits. The two creatures lay motionless on the ice, their small forms shivering violently beneath a thin layer of frost. They resembled foxes, but taller, humanoid in shape with long bushy tails and ears tipped with silvery fur. Eli knelt beside them, scanning rapidly. Their life signs were faint but stable. Barely stay here, he told his ship's AI as he carefully lifted one of the frozen beings into his arms. Its skin was almost blue from cold, and its breaths came in ragged gasps. He carried the second one quickly, stacking them gently in the freighter's medical bay. Temperature rising, stabilizing heart rates, the AI reported in its calm, neutral tone. Eli exhaled a shaky breath. He had saved lives before, but something about these creatures, fragile and trembling, struck a chord deep in his chest. When the girls finally blinked open their wide, amber eyes, they looked at him with something that was neither fear nor trust, but raw, instinctive caution. They didn't speak the language of humans, but their emotions were painfully clear. One shivered, pressing her tiny hands to her chest. The other, slightly older, tilted her head as if trying to understand the world she'd just been pulled back into. Eli knelt in front of them, speaking softly. You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you. It took hours for the girls to recover enough to stand, wrapped in thick thermal blankets and offered the ship's ration packs. Jaren, who had been hiding behind a control console, cautiously approached. He held out a hand, and after a moment, the younger girl hesitated before touching it with her icy fingers. The gesture was simple, yet it bridged the gap between species with a fragile thread of trust. As the freighter warmed, the girls began communicating not with words, but through a series of melodic tones and gestures. Eli and Jaren watched, fascinated, as the creatures interacted with each other, and slowly, they began to understand that the two were sisters, separated from their home colony during a transport accident that had left them stranded on Lyra-9. Eli felt a pang of guilt. I can't imagine being alone out here, he said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. Over the next few days, he worked to help the sisters regain strength. They learned to eat the ship's rations, though they preferred raw fruits and protein gels. They were quick learners, curious and intelligent, absorbing information about human culture through observation. Eli watched Jaren teach them simple games and basic arithmetic, and in turn, they showed him patterns of movement and subtle, almost imperceptible ways of communicating emotion. One evening, as the freighter orbited the icy planet, the sisters approached Eli in unison. Their tails flicked nervously, ears tilted forward. They didn't speak in words, but their gestures were unmistakable. They were offering him something. Jaren tilted his head. What are they doing, Dad? Eli knelt down, realizing what was happening. The girls were offering a pact, a binding gesture of trust and loyalty, an ancient ritual among their species. It wasn't merely gratitude. It was a declaration that they would stand by him, and he by them, should danger ever strike again. I can't accept that, Eli said, surprised. I'm just a pilot. I don't deserve this. But the sisters pressed forward, linking hands and placing their tails over their hearts. The older one's amber eyes met his, unwavering, while the youngers looked up at Jaren briefly before returning to Eli. The sincerity was undeniable, and for the first time in years, Eli felt the weight of destiny, or perhaps responsibility, shift in his chest. All right, he said finally, voice quiet but firm. I accept, but you have to understand. This means nothing will ever happen to you if I can help it. Do you understand? The sisters nodded, their tails wrapped around his arms briefly, a small warmth radiating through the cold metallic deck. Eli felt a strange connection, a bond that transcended species, language, and distance. Soon, the freighter prepared to leave Lyranine. Eli's scanners detected signals from an unknown vessel approaching fast. It wasn't human. The sisters stiffened, tails raised, ears swiveling toward the threat. Eli's instincts kicked in. Stay behind me, he ordered. Don't move. The vessel came into view, a sleek, dark craft bristling with weapons. The life forms inside were hostile, their intentions clear in the flashes of energy from their weapons systems. Eli gritted his teeth, knowing they couldn't outrun or outgun this ship without help, but he had his crew. Even if it was just Jaren and 2 alien girls who had never flown in space before, as the attackers fired, Eli maneuvered the freighter with precision honed by years of experience. He banked sharply through an asteroid field, the icy debris tearing at the hull, while the sisters followed his lead instinctively. In a coordinated motion that surprised even Eli, they moved in sync, using gestures and sounds to warn of incoming dangers. Their natural agility allowed them to leap from console to console, adjusting the ship's defenses almost like co-pilots. Jaren watched in awe. "Dad, they're helping." Eli didn't reply, focusing on evading the next barrage. But inside, a swelling sense of pride took root. They were a team now, bound not by blood or species but by choice and survival. Hours later, after what felt like an eternity in the frozen void, the hostile ship disengaged. Eli exhaled, his hands trembling on the controls. The freighter was battered, but still flying. Jaren jumped up and down, cheering. The sisters, exhausted but unhurt, nuzzled his arm in gratitude. "You saved us," the older sister's tone said without words, her eyes glowing faintly with emotion. "We'll save you too," Eli replied, feeling a lump in his throat. "If we have to, we'll face anything together." The journey back to Vera was quiet, but not uncomfortable. The sisters learned quickly, mastering the ship's systems with surprising skill. They grew attached to Jaren and he to them, forming a little family that transcended planets and species. Eli watched them, sometimes shaking his head in disbelief, other times marveling at the strange twist life had taken when they finally reached the colony. Eli brought the sisters out to meet the officials who had been searching for the missing Fox sisters for months. The reunion was emotional, filled with tears and cautious joy, and yet Eli noticed something remarkable. The girls lingered near him, tails flicking, ears tilted. They had been saved by this human, and despite the comforts of home, they refused to forget that bond. Later that night, Eli tucked Jaren into bed, and the sisters curled up nearby, their tails entwined with his son's blankets. He watched them sleep, feeling a profound sense of wonder. In all the years he had flown through space, facing pirates, storms, and isolation, he had never imagined this: a family of 3 species, united by survival, trust, and the quiet heroism of a single father. He thought back to the moment he first lifted them from the ice, their fragile forms trembling in his arms. In that instant he had made a choice to act without knowing the outcome, and now he realized that choice had changed everything. Not just for him, not just for Jaren, but for the sisters, and perhaps for the galaxy in ways he could never predict. Eli knew this was only the beginning. There would be more dangers, more challenges, more moments when the bond between them would be tested. But for the first time in his life, he felt certain of something. No matter what came, they would face it together, and in the vast, indifferent expanse of the universe. That was enough. The stars gleamed outside the freighter's viewport, cold and distant as ever. But inside, warmth spread through the cabin, a quiet, unbreakable flame. Eli smiled, watching the sisters sleep, knowing that sometimes heroism didn't come from weapons or ships or battles. Sometimes it came simply from showing up, from choosing to care, and from extending a hand to someone the universe had forgotten. And that, Eli realized, was a power more extraordinary than any starship, more enduring than any empire.